Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Duga, and I am so excited to welcome you to today's training. I am passionate about empowering women who are on the journey to start their families or grow their families, like yourself, to accelerate their time to pregnancy, lower their costs on fertility treatment, while also lowering their risk of pregnancy complications. And I think today's training is really going to be mind blowing for you. It's going to be actionable. So if you have not done so already, before we get into it, I want you to grab a cup of water or whatever you like to drink on, grab a notepad and a pen, and make sure you are ready to take notes because I promise you this training is highly actionable and it's going to get you thinking about and strategizing how to truly accelerate your time to pregnancy and have a healthy pregnancy without breaking the bank or your career on fertility treatments.
So let's dive in without further ado. So today's training is titled How to Conceive in the Quickest Time Possible Without Breaking the Bank on Fertility Treatment. We are amidst a global fertility crisis. Currently, 60 to 80 million couples worldwide are experiencing fertility challenges. To put that into perspective, that's 1 in 3 couples. And as a result, many couples are experiencing an unwanted delay in conception. On average, for women under 35 years of age, the average time to pregnancy is 7 months. For women over 35, the average time to pregnancy is more than 12 months. And what I see in my practice is a longer time to pregnancy amongst Black women and other women of color, with an average time to pregnancy of about 2 years. And because of this delay, many couples are seeking IVF treatment. What we're seeing is that 70% of women undergoing IVF go into debt with the average out-of-pocket treatment cost equaling $61,000. But the problems don't end there. Women who undergo IVF treatment are more likely to encounter miscarriages. And what we're seeing is higher rates of death amongst Black newborns conceived with IVF. And if you are not okay with those statistics, as I am not okay with those stats, you are in the right place because we're going to talk about how to shatter these stats, starting with you and your fertility journey. Now, some of you watching this training may be familiar with me. Maybe you've been hanging with me for a minute now. And if so, much love to you. I am so grateful and thankful for you. But if you just found out about me through advertising, I want to make sure I briefly introduce myself to you. So, I'm a board certified physician and I've been a healthcare professional for about 17 years now. I'm the creator of She Does Medicine, where we help career driven women navigate the very, very confusing landscape of infertility and overcome the health and fertility challenges that come with starting or growing their family later in their reproductive years. Now, when I look at the results I've had doing this work, honestly, they're mind blowing. I've helped women who lost their periods menstruate again. I've helped women with low AMH conceive naturally within months. I've helped women going into early menopause drastically improve their cycles. I've helped pregnant women at risk of miscarriage stay pregnant and give birth. I've helped women who have miscarried have their rainbow baby. I've helped 40-year-old women who have never been pregnant before get pregnant within 6 months of working with me. And I've helped men who have low sperm count and quality drastically improve their sperm parameters. And I don't share this to brag, but I do share it to really highlight what's possible for you on this journey. I remember when I decided to specialize in fertility, and I came into this specialty with a lot of limiting beliefs. It was very difficult for me to even fathom or really believe that a 40-year-old woman could conceive naturally and have a healthy baby and do it with ease. And to now be here and be on the other side of that, knowing that I've helped women do just that is really mind blowing for me. And so, really, my brags are, the brags of my clients and what they've achieved. My clients are the women who are over 35, whom society has, labeled geriatric. We all love that term, right? Or infertile, and really watching them rewrite their fertility story and achieve their goal of being a mom. That is an absolute joy for me. And whenever they win, I feel like I'm winning alongside with them. So in this season of my life, it's really all about creating opportunities for many more women to do the same and create the family that they desire. And so I'm really excited for us to work together and to see what you create in this next season of your life. So let's talk about you, because that's what we're really here for, right? So if you're watching this training, you really fit into one of four buckets. One of those buckets is building your plan. And maybe this is you. So building your plan is you've been trying to conceive for a few months, but the challenge is you're not getting pregnant. So in an attempt to figure out why you're not getting pregnant, you've sought medical support either through your OBGYN or your PCP, and testing revealed low AMH. And as a result of that test, you were advised that your next best step to achieve conception was to consult with an IVF specialist. So you consulted an IVF specialist. However, you're not ready to subject your body to the procedure and all the drugs. So the other challenge is finding other options that support your body in getting pregnant naturally. What we hear over and over and over again from our clients is that they want IVF to be their very last resort and want to learn more about what they can do to give their body the best chance to conceive naturally. Building your plan also looks like you're struggling with chronic pain and you worry that you would have a really painful or difficult pregnancy, or maybe you're wondering, can I even get pregnant? And because primarily you've never been pregnant before, so you have a lot of doubts. So the challenge is getting out of pain and also getting healthier so that you can increase your chances of not just getting pregnant, but having a healthy pregnancy. Or maybe you're trying to conceive with a sperm donor and you're encountering challenges with sperm quality and you're hesitant to move forward with insemination because you're concerned about miscarriage, prolonged time to pregnancy, or multiple rounds of insemination in an unhealthy pregnancy. So, whatever situation you fall in within this category, you're currently looking for someone with a holistic approach to add to your team. So, if this is you, know that you are in the right place. And we're definitely going to be talking about strategies that are particularly applicable to where you are at this stage in your journey. Or this could be you. You might be prepping for IVF because you've been trying to get pregnant for about a year. You've tried timed intercourse, but no pregnancy. But on top of that, uh, your other challenge is that you've received the diagnosis of diminished ovarian reserve, and each time you get tested, the AMH levels keep decreasing. So really, this is concerning, and time is really of the essence for you. And so you're in touch with an IVF doctor, and you're prepping to start the IVF process within the next couple of months. But you don't feel good. You're having trouble sleeping. You're tired all the time, and you're even gaining weight, particularly around the belly. And your main objective at this stage is to optimize IVF outcomes and ensure successful embryo making and successful implantation because you want to avoid several rounds of IVF. All right. So, and I totally get that. You're also challenged with not having a roadmap to follow to optimize those IVF outcomes. So if this is you, know that you're in the right place. And we're definitely going to be talking about strategies that are particularly applicable to where you are at in this stage in your journey. Or maybe this is you. You're pivoting to a different solution after treatment failure. Now, the journey has been really long for you. You've been on it for many years now. You've undergone a lot of IVF procedures, hormone treatments, and medications. You've endured cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle for egg retrievals, embryo transfers, and honestly, too many surgeries to keep count. So you've really been through it, and you're likely on a break before you move on to your next cycle. But truth be told, you are truly concerned about all the hormones you have taken over the years. So you are also noticing body changes such as weight gain. You are much more tired than you've ever been, and you have trouble sleeping. And some women have even admitted to me that they really no longer recognize themselves. So living a healthier life has become a priority for you. So if this is you, you'll be hearing a different perspective on other options you should consider to live a healthier life. And finally, you may be trying to get unstuck. Now, you too have been on a really long journey, and your fertility challenge is all you think about. I mean, you tried everything, and your OBGYN told you to try for a year, and if you're still not pregnant, come back, and you did that. And you were referred to a specialist, and they found things like polyps or fibroids, or maybe even both, and you had them removed. But you still didn't get pregnant. And because the journey has been long, age has become more of a barrier for you. So much so that you've been told that due to your low egg reserve, that your best option was an egg donor. And of course, this is devastating news because you don't want to create your family using someone else's eggs. So you decided not to move forward with the egg donor process, and you remain a little stuck on your journey, and you've kind of been stuck there for a few years. Now you may be here because you've recently had the epiphany or the revelation that if there's any chance that you can become a mother, you need to try it now because time is slowly slipping away. Or maybe your situation is that you're able to get pregnant, but your challenge is staying pregnant. Now, you too may have had fibroids removed, but you're still encountering the challenge of not being able to carry the pregnancy to term. Whatever situation you find yourself within this category, in the end, you feel stuck because you have no clear path to get to your desired goal. So if this is you, know that you are in the right place, and we're definitely going to be talking about strategies to get you unstuck and improve your reproductive health. So if you're in one of those four buckets, you're currently looking for someone with a holistic approach to add to your team. You're looking for a roadmap to optimize IVF outcomes. You're looking to live a healthier life so you can feel like yourself again, or you're looking to improve reproductive health and have hope again, you are in the right place. And regardless of which bucket you land in, really the overarching goal that unites all of us is that you're thinking about how to expedite the process, but in a way that aligns with your vision and your pockets. And many of us really dream of motherhood, and we prepare ourselves for it, we prepare our lives for it, only to find ourselves encountering health challenges along the way and panicked that our window of opportunity to become a mom is coming to a quick close. And you might be spending more time stressing about all the challenges as opposed to actually enjoying the process of making a baby. Now, when I was growing up, we used to sing a song that goes like this: first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage, right? You know, giving us the impression that having a baby was an automatic if you followed the rules in that order. But now that you're ready to start your family, you realize that there is a lot that goes into making a baby. So we're going to make the transformation. We're going to look at how you can accelerate your time to pregnancy and finally have your baby. And this is a transformation that you definitely want to make, because what we find is there's such a massive opportunity with fertility optimization. What I mean by this is by improving the health of your whole fertility system, which includes the HPA axis in the brain, the adrenals, your thyroid, your gut, and your ovaries. We can overcome the financial constraints that are often barriers to achieving pregnancy. And by prioritizing approaches that promote overall health, your mental and emotional well being improves, allowing you to feel a sense of control and hope. An example is my work with Regina, who had never been pregnant before, went from no success getting pregnant to pregnant with her first baby at the age of 40 after working with me for only 6 months. She had no AMH, irregular cycles, and chronic joint pain. She was 39 when we started working together, and on the weekend, listen now, on the weekend of her 40th birthday, she got pregnant naturally. So here is what had to happen before she got pregnant. We improved the function of her digestive system. We improved the function of her thyroid and adrenals, which naturally improved her reproductive function. Us taking the time to improve these systems is what accelerated her time to pregnancy, saved her over $50,000 on fertility treatment, and helped her have a healthy pregnancy and safe delivery. So fertility optimization is really a game changer and can be life-changing for you. And so that's what we're going to look at, is how do you make that transformation and create that outcome for yourself? So today I will show you how to gain control, confidence, and clarity. Okay, so first and foremost, again, this will be highly actionable. If you have not already, grab a notepad and a pen. I want you to first map out your time to pregnancy goal. Start with the end in mind and answer this question. What is your time to pregnancy goal? Again, take action. I want you to play full out. I want you to document, take notes, and really reflect, because those who take action are the ones who are going to maximize the strategies from this training. Okay, so in terms of time to pregnancy goals, I tend to think in cycles, but I know for some people, they prefer to think monthly, so you can do that too. And again, make sure you write it down, because by simply writing something down, you have a 42% higher chance of achieving it. So write this down if you have not done so already. Now, write down your family size goal. Do you want to create a family of 3, 4, a family of 5? Really allow yourself to be completely honest about your dream family size. Do not limit yourself. I don't want you to allow limiting beliefs to keep you from dreaming big. So really dream big here. The next thing I want you to do is to write down your fertility body type. Now, you likely took the fertility body type quiz before getting to this training, and if so, you should know your fertility body type by now. If not, I want you to pause this training and take the fertility body type quiz at shedoesmedicine.com/quiz. Then once you've written down your fertility body type, come back and resume the training. And later on in this training, we'll discuss your fertility body type in further detail. What we found is that through these strategies that I'm about to teach, clients are able to get pregnant in half the amount of time than the average woman trying to conceive. And we do that through a 5-part protocol, which is a system. Now, I want to stop here and acknowledge a very common belief that most of us have, and that is the belief that getting pregnant is supposed to be easy, and it's not something you should have to prepare your body for, right? When we were young, we were taught that, getting pregnant was easy, so a lot of us spent a lot of time trying not to get pregnant, right? But fast forward to now, we're grown, we're living in a different time. Our modern society has made it very difficult for a lot of us to get pregnant. As I mentioned before, 1 in 3 couples are struggling with infertility, and that number keeps growing. In fact, female and male fertility has declined by more than 50% in the past 4 decades, and almost all men today would have been considered infertile 2 generations ago. So this is what we're all up against. And so to beat the odds stacked against you, you need a system. The reason why I believe in systems is because systems go beyond the tips and the tactics. Unlike tips and tactics, systems create predictable results. Notice that I said predictable and not desired result, because a system may not always create the result that you want, but if it's predictable, at least we have the intel, the insight, and the data to tweak and fine tune it to where we want it to be. Systems also create confidence. You've got to get out of your own head so that you can focus on listening and being present with your body and what's happening with your cycle. We know from studies and clinical experience that 97% of what you're experiencing with your fertility challenges stems from not optimizing your fertility. Your fertility is governed by a predictable system that, when mastered, gives you the confidence to overcome your challenges. And when you learn and master this system, you're going to see the same things over and over and over again. You're going to notice that your body is showing you the same signs cycle after cycle. And when you respond appropriately to these signs, you start to notice immediate results. And so what you want to do is leverage a proven cycle health optimization system so that you can improve the efforts you are currently putting into achieving your fertility goals. When you do this, you build confidence, and with confidence, you're able to release the stress and surrender to the journey. You're able to be present, and you're able to manage whatever comes your way. Because a lot of what we find from working with women with fertility challenges is there's a lot of disappointment and frustration that comes from getting their period. But with a system that not only gives you the intel of the cycle issues you need to work on, but also tracks your progress, you get confident. When you're seeing the progress cycle after cycle, and as you approach the cycle that's going to get you pregnant, there's no frustration. There's only motivation and confirmation that you are on the right path to pregnancy. Lastly, systems create clarity. Most women trying to get pregnant have been told visit after visit by their doctors, everything looks normal. I don't understand why you're not getting pregnant. Most of the time, this scenario plays out because their doctor does not have a system to dive deep and do a thorough workup that puts the pieces together. But getting clear answers on why you're not getting pregnant or why nothing you've tried has worked is the most important step in the fertility journey. If you don't have clarity, then you can't possibly know what steps to take to reach your destiny to become a mother. So systems create predictable results, confidence, and clarity. I hope you're following along with me so far. The particular system that I'm going to teach you today is the flow formula. This is the framework that I created and train my clients to. It's called the flow formula. I'm repeating it because I'm hoping that you're writing it down. Now I'm going to break it down for you and tell you what each of those letters stand for.
So first and foremost, find the root cause. Again, please write this down because this is really, really important. To successfully make your way on any journey, you need to know where you are starting from. And we know where we are starting from identifying the root causes, the source of the problem. What I see over and over and over again is that most women trying to get pregnant do not spend their time, energy, and money on the real problem of their infertility. They spend most of their time and money on rounds of expensive drugs and procedures that often don't work or even make matters worse because these treatments do not address the root cause of their fertility challenges. The truth is that most women can't get pregnant because they typically have an underlying health issue that's not being addressed. Now, where most go wrong is they think PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, diminished ovarian reserve is the cause, but that thinking is misguided because PCOS, endo, fibroids, diminished ovarian reserve is the effect of what is going on beneath the surface, not the cause. So, to accelerate your time to pregnancy, you must focus your attention on the root cause of your fertility challenge. But in order to do this, we must first address some major myths. So, let's begin. Now, if you received a diagnosis of infertility, the first thing I want you to do is to separate yourself from the diagnosis of infertility. There is a myth behind the diagnosis of infertility that you need to know, and that is infertility is a label for a condition that can have many root causes. It is not a real diagnosis. I repeat that. Infertility is a label, it is not a real diagnosis. It is simply a term used by medical physicians to communicate to insurance companies that you haven't been able to get pregnant after at least 6 to 12 months of trying. That's it. That's all it really means. Now, the medical system needs this term to pay for testing to identify the problem and possible treatment. But this term infertility doesn't explain the cause and leaves many women stuck with the label. And I call this a necessary evil of the medical system. Necessary because the label does help with getting testing and treatment, but evil because the diagnosis of infertility is really inaccurate and most likely it has nothing to do with you. Evil because you receive the diagnosis and you actually start to buy into the belief that you can't have a baby without the drugs and the shots. But the danger in buying into these beliefs is that it can cause psychological stress that sets your brain off into a negative mental feedback loop. And this loop negatively impacts the menstrual cycle, ovulation, testosterone, and sperm production, all of which you need to work properly to get pregnant. And I see this happen so often to so many women, and it frustrates me so bad. I'm like, you have to let go of this infertility label. Um, because this is what tends to happen when you latch onto it. So the negative mental feedback loop typically looks like this. So you've been given the diagnosis, and then amidst all of that, you try a series of things to get pregnant, like time in a course, no pregnancy, change in diet, no pregnancy, IUI, no pregnancy, IVF, no pregnancy, or maybe you get pregnant, but unfortunately you miscarry. All of these failed interventions just reinforce this belief that you're infertile. And so you get stuck in a vicious cycle of failure that takes you on an emotional roller coaster. And this cycle is so powerful that it becomes a part of your identity. And when something becomes a part of your identity, it's much harder to overcome because it changes what you believe to be possible for your own body. So, in a sense, it rewires your brain to almost not believe that you can achieve this pregnancy that you desire. Now, what you need to know is that research shows that only 3% of the world's population is truly infertile, meaning truly sterile. So they would not be able to get pregnant no matter what. No amount of IVF would get them pregnant. So that means there is only a 3% chance that you're truly infertile, even if you receive that diagnosis. So that's a very, very, very small chance. Most women and couples in the world are able to actually have a baby naturally. So that means you're more likely to be fertile than infertile. So at this point, you may be wondering, so why can't I get pregnant if I'm not infertile? If you've been trying to get pregnant, but you can't, you are most likely subfertile. Subfertility is a more accurate term because it means that there is reduced or lowered fertility due to an underlying health challenge. The positive about the subfertile condition is that when the root cause is addressed, pregnancy happens with much more ease. And there's a concept behind this that makes it work that most people are not aware of, and that is Fertility is not fixed. It's plastic, meaning it can be shaped, it can be molded, it can be changed, and therefore repaired. Another way to look at this is that fertility lies on a spectrum. It is a flexible system. So it isn't this black and white thing that most people think it is, where either you're fertile or you're infertile and you can't change it no matter what. The other myth is it's just not God's timing. Usually, when a woman is trying to conceive and no pregnancy happens, they conclude it's just not God's timing. Now, while they might be true, oftentimes it's not. I remember having a conversation with my mother about infertility, and she said, C'est bon Dieu qui baille petit, meaning it's God who gives children. Now, while I believe that being able to create your family is miraculous, what I know for sure in working with women and couples struggling with infertility is that there are biochemical processes that often need restoration to be successful in getting pregnant, whether that's naturally or via IVF or IUI or whatever method that you choose. These biochemical processes are often restored by addressing major lifestyle factors that only you can address. In other words, you can't outsource the work because the work is yours to do. I'll say that one more time. You can't outsource the work to doctors, to pills, to supplements, to drugs, to procedures, because the work is yours to do. So faith in God is a great foundation, but without work, it's dead. The fact is, God gives you an opportunity every month to have a baby, because every month the female body follows a natural fertility hormonal cycle that develops a premature egg into a mature egg. So you have the opportunity to ensure proper development of that premature egg into a good quality mature egg. And we will get into how you can do that later on in this training. So, what are the root causes? The major ones are chronic stress, nutrient deficiencies, toxic overload, gut dysfunction, hormonal imbalance, and trauma. So let's take PCOS for example. One of the major root causes of this is very high insulin levels, which keeps the body in fat storage mode most of the time, even while you're sleeping, making it easy to gain weight and nearly impossible to lose weight. And it keeps blood sugar levels really high, which contributes to poor ovulation. So things like metformin and clomid really just doesn't cut it, because it doesn't directly address the high insulin levels that you often see in PCOS. But another root cause of PCOS is gut dysfunction. So if you feel tired or bloated after eating, those are clues that imbalances in your gut can be causing your fertility challenges. The key thing you need to understand is that for standard fertility treatments are really just removing the branches while the root causes remain unseen and unaddressed. Now, the danger in this approach is that women often get very poor outcomes, experience prolonged infertility that takes a toll on women mentally, emotionally, and physically. I've spoken to so many women who've shared with me that the only reason that they move forward with fertility treatments like IVF is because they were running out of time and wanted to fast track their time to pregnancy. And in every case, or almost nearly every case, they find themselves years into treatment with no success. So, what I've learned from these conversations is that fertility treatment can actually cause further delay in pregnancy. And that's because the medications ignore the root cause, create more imbalance in the system, which further delays pregnancy while the biological clock is ticking away. The second step in the flow formula is let go of limiting lifestyle habits. As I mentioned earlier, your fertility is not fixed, it's plastic. And there is research that shows that lifestyle habits can reshape or rewire your fertility system so that it becomes more fertile naturally. There is a study called the Lifestyle Study that investigated the effects of a 6-month lifestyle intervention among women who were trying to conceive but diagnosed as infertile. And the study found that women in the intervention group, or those who did the lifestyle program, had significantly more natural conceptions than women who did not go through the lifestyle program. So, lifestyle changes are powerful in rewiring and repairing the fertility system. And I see this in my practice all the time. So, it's not just a research study, there's a lot of clinical evidence that also shows this. The other myth we have to let go of as women is that the only difference between us and our male counterparts are our periods and our ability to carry babies. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. So, our bodies, my body, your body, the female body is more stress sensitive than men's bodies. We react to stress differently depending where we are in our menstrual cycles and where we are in our reproductive years. Now, why would that be the case? Well, let's think about this from an evolutionary standpoint. From an evolutionary standpoint, we are the childbearing, child rearing gender. And so our bodies need to be very crystal clear about whether it's safe to have a baby or not. And because of this, the female body has a more sensitive, refined mechanism to detect stress. So, really, you can think of your fertility as a stress barometer, a pressure gauge, if you will, that is always looking out into your environment, measuring stress. It is a reactive and adaptive system whose main objective is your survival. And what it primarily cares about is, are you recovering from stress adequately? And is it bringing you back into balance? Now, what we have to begin to understand and broaden our understanding regarding stress is that eating too little and eating too much is a stress to your fertility system. Exercising too little and exercising too much is a stress to your fertility system. Sleep deprivation is a stress to the fertility system. But also, working in environments that overwork you, underpay you, and micromanage you are huge stressors to your fertility system. The second thing we have to understand about stress is that there is normal stress and then there's chronic stress. Normal stress turns on when it's needed and then it turns off. However, when stressful situations become the norm and you lack resources to control them, the stress response can stay turned on. This is called the chronic stress response. And when the chronic stress response is turned on in your body, reproduction gets placed on the back burner because your bodily resources are busy attending to the stress around you. And this makes pregnancy achievement really, really difficult. One of the principles I teach my clients is the law of cyclicity, which states that health and fertility performs best when our lifestyles are synced to the female hormonal cycle. Now, to understand why this principle is relevant to you and important, let's dive into some modern medicine history. So, you need to know that modern medicine was developed with male physiology as the default. So, what that means is modern medicine treats women's bodies as if it's just a smaller version of the male body. And this has heavily influenced how physicians and scientists have come to understand human physiology. It's especially influenced how primary care doctors and OBGYNs approach healthcare and approach women's healthcare. And so, what we see is that historically, medical texts have valued male physiology over female physiology. An example of this is how medical texts describe the male reproductive system as efficient and productive, with longevity, with an uncanny ability to produce 200 to 300 million sperm until uh he dies, essentially, right? Like there's a longevity aspect to the male reproductive system, and so it's therefore seen as more productive, whereas the female reproductive system is described as part useful and part wasteful and useless. And the reason why I say that is because we see the female reproductive system as useful only for conception, while the period is seen as either useless or unnecessary. And I actually have a story behind this. So while I was training for my fertility specialty, I got the opportunity to train with an internationally uh, renowned hormone expert, and I was sitting through a lecture where he was talking about PCOS. Now, PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is one of the most common endocrine disorders that affect women and also affect women who are struggling to conceive. And I was sitting there and I was listening, I was engaged, I was excited, and I was learning so much. And then I hear him say, there's no medical reason for menstruation. And when he said that, my jaw literally dropped. Y'all know that emoji with the eyes and mouth wide open? Yeah, that was me. I mean, I was so turned off by his statement that I actually stopped investing in his courses. But you know what? It really challenged me to really explore what were my own thoughts on the matter. Is menstruation necessary or is it not necessary? Now, truth be told, so many of us have period problems that some of us wouldn't mind not having a period. I know that. But with my curious mind, I began to dig into the research on the menstrual cycle, and I discovered an official order that was made by the American College of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, which is essentially the legal authority and professional association that governs the way that OBGYNs practice. And they made an official order that stated that the menstrual cycle is a fifth vital sign. So when I came across this, I was like, oh, this is very interesting. I've never heard this before. So now what that means is just as your temperature, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, and blood pressure tells you how healthy your system is, your menstrual cycle is also a biomarker of your health. Now, to take it a step further, it means that period problems are the equivalent of having a fever or high blood pressure. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, and I'll repeat it. Period problems are the equivalent of having a fever or high blood pressure. Okay? So take that in. So even though there are professional organizations and there's research that states that the menstrual cycle is not only necessary but is considered a fifth vital sign, the reason why so many of us have not heard that or are not being taught that is that the challenge is that the dominant cultural narrative where in one way or another we see the menstrual cycle as a curse. We make fun or we gaslight women who have period problems like PMS. We make light of periods that are painful, that are heavy or irregular. This dominant culture narrative really keeps us from stepping into the mindset to deconstruct the cultural condition response to ignore our menstrual cycle and to replace it with actually seeing period problems as being equally problematic as a fever or high blood pressure. But what's so toxic about this culture attitude that most of us have and we're always around is that we as we have these problems, these period problems for 1 month, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 9 years, we walk around with what's equivalent to a fever or high blood pressure, and we do nothing because that's what you have been taught to do. Now, what does this have to do with you right now? Well, here it is. Fertility challenges are largely the result of ignoring your menstrual cycles, suffering through period problems, and a culture that makes light of your health issues. So now, once we understand that, the second scientific fact that you have to understand is this: the male body is governed by the 24-hour circadian rhythm. Some of you have probably heard of the circadian rhythm, right? So the male body is governed by that rhythm. But the female body is governed by both a circadian rhythm and a second biological clock called the infradian rhythm. So, unlike the circadian rhythm that you experience over the course of 24 hours, over the course of a day, the infradian rhythm is the clock that governs the 28-day cycle. Now, you may not have a 28-day cycle. It may be shorter, it may be longer, right? So insert, your number in terms of your cycle. So it may not be 28, but the point of it is it's what governs the menstrual cycle for however long it is. So you experience it over the course of about a month. But what you really need to understand and walk away with is that the infradian rhythm doesn't just affect your period. It governs 6 systems in your body. So it governs the brain, your metabolism, your immune system, microbiome, stress response system, and your reproductive organs. And because all of these systems impact fertility, we must acknowledge the infradian rhythm, and we must address the infradian rhythm dysfunctions. Now, you might have put this piece together already. So what we know as the menstrual cycle is an infradian rhythm, right? So that means that your menstrual cycle doesn't just govern your period, it governs those 6 systems that I mentioned. And so by abiding to the law of cyclicity, which states that health and fertility performs best when our lifestyles are synced to the female hormonal cycle, we are able to regulate the infradian rhythm and optimize fertility very quickly because we are impacting all of the major systems that influence fertility all at once. Okay, now this is the key to accelerating time to pregnancy and keeping costs of fertility treatments as low as possible. So if you have not already written this down, this law of cyclicity in the major concepts I've just went over, I want you to write it down because this is really, really important. And this is something that most people are not talking about, but it is so important when it comes to female fertility. So the other myth that we have to bust, and this really stems from that dominant culture narrative that teaches us to ignore our menstrual cycle, because when we do that, we grow up with a lack of knowledge of what the menstrual cycle actually does and in the intricacies of it. So first, you need to know that ovulation is the main event of your cycle, not your period. The goal of your entire female hormonal cycle is to ovulate. And now the misconception most of us have about our cycle is that if we have regular periods, periods that come every month, then our periods are normal. We assume that it means that we've ovulated. And that's actually not the case. You can actually have a period every month and not ovulate. And if this is the first time you're learning this, you've never heard this before, don't feel bad because I didn't learn this until way, 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 way later. This is not something that I even learned in my medical training. I learned it afterwards, doing my own research. So the only way to accurately know if you're ovulating regularly is to track it. And I'm not referring to app tracking and relying on an app to tell you if you've ovulated, because actually that's the surest way to fail at accurately tracking ovulation, because apps are not scientifically tested for efficacy. So it's very misleading a lot of the times. So what I'm really referring to is making daily observations of both your cervical fluid patterns and your basal body temperatures. The second misconception is that if you ovulate, then you've made enough progesterone to carry a pregnancy to term. And that's not true either. You can actually have a regular ovulatory cycles and still not make enough progesterone. And this is a huge problem because low progesterone negatively impacts pregnancy outcomes by leading to early miscarriage. And so what I call this a silent ovulatory disturbance, because you can't tell that this is a problem unless you're doing something actively to figure it out. And I find that women do not have an effective cycle tracking system to uncover this very common issue. So key takeaway here is this: you need a scientific cycle tracking system. You have to go beyond the apps, and you also have to go beyond the ovulation test strips. So if you're only tracking your period, you are missing a huge piece of the puzzle. You need an effective system for identifying silent menstrual cycle abnormalities. An example of a very common silent menstrual cycle dysfunction is what is called a luteal phase defect. That's when the second half of your cycle isn't long enough to sustain or keep a pregnancy to full term. So it's possible that you could be getting pregnant, but the pregnancy loss is happening so early in the cycle that you're not even catching it. Okay, so far we've discussed the importance of knowing where you are starting from by identifying the root causes. Then we discuss the foundational mindset shifts that you have to make around lifestyle habits in order to accelerate your time to pregnancy and to keep costs on fertility treatment as low as possible. Now, part 3 of the protocol is about overcoming premature reproductive aging to lower your risk of pregnancy complications. Statistics show that there is a marked difference between the reproductive outcomes of Black women and white women. One of the statistics that you need to be aware of is that white women in their 20s are more likely to give birth to a healthy baby than those in their teens. But amongst Black women, the opposite is true. The older the mother, the greater the risk of maternal and newborn health complications and death. Now, to put some numbers to it, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during or after childbirth than any other racial group in America. This maternal mortality statistic is one of the widest of all racial health disparities in women's health. Now, what I mean by that is a Black woman is 22% more likely to die from heart disease than a white woman, 71% more likely to die from cervical cancer, but 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth related causes. So, what we are faced with on this fertility journey is not to be taken lightly. And currently, the statistics have not improved. And we've had this issue going on for almost 30 years, and we have not really seen much of a decline. We're seeing the opposite. We're seeing an increase in this statistic. So you have to be very aware of this risk if you are a Black woman watching this training and you are trying to get pregnant. This is not something that you want to put on the back burner. I argue that this is something that needs to be on the front end, because it is my belief that part of the reason that Black women and other women of color suffer at a higher risk from fertility challenges is because of this. It's because we are at such a higher risk of dying that the body is actually protecting us from that. Because remember, the body is about survival first and reproduction second. Now, fortunately, a Harvard researcher by the name of Dr. Arlene Geronimus discovered why this was happening and coined the term weathering to explain the phenomena on the social biological level. Now, this phenomenon weathering occurs when the accumulation of chronic stress caused by structural racism results in earlier breakdown and earlier aging of organs and tissues. So, in other words, simply being Black in America puts us at a higher risk of aging earlier. And to put that into the context of fertility, being Black in America causes abnormal premature reproductive aging. So, if you remember earlier in part two, I touched upon chronic stress, where I explained that the chronic stress response makes getting pregnant really difficult because when your body is in that state, it puts reproduction on the back burner. But this particular chronic stress response caused by structural racism literally steals resources that support healthy fertility and healthy pregnancies. Now, for me, what that looks like and how that shows up in the clinic when I'm treating a Black woman or I'm treating a Latino woman is I'm seeing that these women are showing up with exhaustion and burnout. And so they really don't have the energy resource to even get through the day, let alone have the energy to create and have a baby, which takes a lot of energy and takes a lot of resources. And I think a lot of women are underestimating how much energy and how much resources it takes in order to do that successfully. It also shows up as nutrient deficiency. So, women with iron deficiency, which is an essential nutrient for healthy fertility and healthy pregnancy. You need iron to be at optimal levels in order to have healthy periods, in order to make high quality eggs, in order to ovulate properly. And I'm also seeing progesterone deficiency, which is the hormone needed to prevent miscarriage. Okay, so those are a few ways that I'm seeing that show up in my clinic. Now, because the damage of weathering accumulates over time, we also see chronic conditions like hypertension, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes at a younger age amongst Black women. I mean, we're seeing it show up as early 20s, mid 20s, and 30s. Even 30s is a really young age to be diagnosed with any of those chronic conditions. And the thing that you need to know is all of those chronic conditions negatively impact fertility because these conditions accelerate aging and results in premature reproductive aging. Now, what that means is that a Black woman can be 30 years old chronologically, but 38 years old biologically or reproductively. So you may be 30 years old, but your biological age could be 38. And I would say, just based on the research that I've seen, whatever current age that you are right now, if you suspect that um, the reason why you can't get pregnant is due to this premature reproductive aging because you have the signs for it, such as low AMH, diminished ovarian reserve, and things like that. I would say add 7 years to your current age, and that'll give you a ballpark of what your biological age is. And this is just based on the research that I've read. And so, what you need to know is that this abnormal aging pattern is so consistent amongst us that Dr. Geronimus has stated that a Black woman of any social class, as early as her mid 20s, should be attended to differently because that's the age where biological aging begins to accelerate and we start having conditions like diabetes and hypertension. Now, the thing that enrages me about the fertility industry is that IVF clinics use the same approach for Black women and other women of color as they do for white women, even though they know statistically IVF success rates are much lower for Black women and other women of color. And they are lower because their approach overlooks the needs of Black women and other women of color. Now, here is the most important concept to learn here. There is chronological age and there is biological age, which I also refer to as reproductive age. And when it comes to fertility, biological age is what's most important. But the grace and the good news is that you can actually reverse reproductive aging. And that's because reproductive age is an epigenetic process, meaning it is a modifiable characteristic. So it can be modified through different pathways. And the major pathways that can modify it actually relate back to the major root causes that I discussed earlier. So the stress pathway, the gut pathway, the hormone pathway, the toxins and detoxification pathway, the nutrient pathways, and also relate back to the infradian rhythm that governs the major body systems that modify fertility function. So, in this part of the protocol, we really focus on slowing and reversing biological reproductive aging by leveraging the epigenetic pathways in your body. So, if you are a Black woman or a Latino woman listening to this training, and your fertility treatment or your current fertility approach or whatever else that you are doing to overcome your fertility challenge, if it does not address this very critical aspect of your health, then you aren't getting the care that you need. You are wasting time and you are delaying pregnancy. You have to address this critical piece because it's such um a determining factor to your fertility success. Part 4 is welcome your super fertile body. Now, when we get down to the cellular level, the fertility challenges you're facing are mostly due to chromosomal abnormalities, which are also called genetic abnormalities. And honestly, every woman has some number of genetically abnormal eggs, and the number of these eggs does increase with age. Now, to quote Dr. Cleopatra, who is a reproductive scientist, she states, "It is thought that by the time a woman reaches the age of 40, 90% of her eggs are genetically abnormal, which is why it can be really difficult to get pregnant in the first place, and also why the odds of miscarriage or not being able to conceive can actually be higher than the odds of a successful pregnancy. But the common belief is that we can't do anything to change these odds and that we have very little control over the health of our eggs as we age. But what most people don't know is that an egg doesn't complete its maturation until the months leading up to its release. It actually takes about 120 days for this maturation process to complete before the egg reaches the ovulation phase. And it is within this last developmental window we can make the most positive impact on egg quality and reverse chromosomal abnormalities, even if you are 35 years or older, or even if you are showing signs of premature aging. Now, basically, what she's saying is that um, belief that we have all of the eggs that we are going to release during our reproductive age, and that they get older as we age and we can't do anything about the age of the eggs is actually false. Why? Because although we have the eggs, we're carrying them, they actually haven't completed the maturation process. They're actually not fully developed. And they begin to finish their development 4 months before we actually ovulate. So in that 4 month period is when we can actually lay the groundwork and lay the foundation for that egg to be developed in the best environment possible. So we have a more control over the age of our eggs than we have been told. Okay. And so the key takeaway here is this: the quality of the DNA in the egg and the sperm is a modifiable characteristic that has to be changed in the period leading up to when the egg and the sperm are produced. Once the egg and sperm are produced, we have less of an ability to make an impact. Now, naturally, what we do when we're ready to start our family is we start actively timing sex around ovulation. But because so many of us have unaddressed health issues by the time we're ready, that's actually not the fastest way to get pregnant. In fact, studies show that if you're not pregnant by month 4 of trying, the odds of pregnancy decrease with each month you keep trying after that 4-month mark. So, what you want to do is spend at least 4 months optimizing your fertility system so that you can create the best quality egg and best quality sperm, because that is what's going to get you pregnant quickly and as soon as possible. Okay, so far you have find the root cause, let go of limiting lifestyle habits, overcome premature reproductive aging, and welcome your super fertile body. Each of these on its own is incredibly powerful. So you can take one piece of this and apply it to your current game plan. And I'll give you an example of how women in the past have done this. So I had a client come to my clinic after being told that IVF was her only option. But she was still kind of exploring her other options. So she comes to me, and after we talked, I realized that, IVF really was the best option for her because she didn't have fallopian tubes. But I did suggest to her that working with our system would still benefit her because it would allow her to make the best quality eggs, and so it would make the egg retrieval process in the IVF cycle much more smoother and increase her success rate. Unfortunately, sis didn't listen to me. So she moved forward with the first IVF cycle without prepping her body, and unfortunately the IVF cycle failed. She was devastated, and after a few months of collecting herself and getting herself to try again, go for the second IVF cycle, she came back to me and decided to work with our system. And what we found out was that she actually had gut a gut dis what we call gut dysbiosis, which is when the microbiome and the digestive system is throwing off hormonal balance and also interfering with egg quality. So we addressed that using the let go of limiting lifestyle habit strategies. And we worked on that for 2 months. And she went back for the second IVF cycle, and boom, she got pregnant. And she actually had her baby last summer, and it's a healthy baby. The pregnancy went well, everything went really well. And we were really, really, really happy about that. Second example of how a client has used one piece of this system is a woman who came to us after a miscarriage, and after investigating, we found that she had an overactive thyroid, and so we used the overcome by reversing reproductive aging strategies, and she was able to have her rainbow baby. So those are some examples of how you can leverage just one piece of this system and have it work for you. So we have those four pieces, but I believe the one that no one is talking about is this fifth part. And this fifth part is an extension of the O part. So over the years, I've realized that in order to get to the quickest results, there is a particular order that must be followed. And also, treatment must be personalized to the individual. Now, most women trying to get pregnant are really trying the same standard approach. Like, when I have talked to women, I noticed that they are all getting the same type of IVF treatment, despite the fact that they have very different fertility challenges. And so I consider that to be part of why IVF success rates are not as good as they should be, especially given the cost, is because it's not personalized. So, what you need to know is that every woman's fertility is actually unique. There's something different about each woman's fertility. And And because of this uniqueness, the most successful treatments are personalized to your unique biochemistry. I'll give you an example of this. So, there is a case that I've treated that involves a woman with a history of fibroids. And she followed the standard advice, which was to first try for 6 months. And if she wasn't pregnant in 6 months, come back. She did that. And then they evaluated her further and found that she had fibroids. And they told her that she needed to remove the fibroids in order to get pregnant. She removed the fibroids. And years later, she's still not pregnant. So 5 years in, she finds our services. And after we do a deep dive by doing some, really comprehensive testing on her, what we found was that she had multiple nutrient deficiencies like iron deficiency, vitamin B6 deficiency, zinc deficiency. She was deficient in stomach acid, which made it very difficult for her to break down the food and make it difficult for her to absorb the nutrients from the food. So basically her body thought she was starving. So even though she was eating, she wasn't breaking down her food properly. So it was throwing off her fertility system. Now, in addition to the comprehensive testing, we also ran an epigenetics test on her, which showed that she actually doesn't have the enzymes to detoxify her estrogen properly, which is what contributed to the fibroids in the first place. Now, because the only treatment that she got for her fibroids was a fibroid removal, and they never addressed what was at the root of it, she was still having trouble getting pregnant because the root of the fibroids wasn't addressed to begin with. And so in her particular case, the way that we personalized her treatment is we focused on optimizing detoxification, because without doing that, she wouldn't be able to optimize her fertility system and get pregnant, because the excess estrogen and the excess toxins swarming in her body is what was interfering with proper egg development, also interfering with proper ovulation. The second part in how we personalized her treatment is we addressed her exhaustion. I find that women who have been on this journey for a few years are often exhausted, like their systems are fatigued. So the very first step really to optimizing her fertility is to first address the exhaustion by resting her nervous system. Without resting the nervous system, there's no way that her body can actually take the appropriate steps to restore the hormones, to repair the digestion, to replete the nutrients that she's deficient in, to rebuild the mitochondria that she needs for the energy, and to reboot the metabolism that she needs in order to ovulate properly. Okay? So that's an example of how we, one, personalized her treatment, and two, how we use this 6-step fertility optimization system to get her pregnant. So again, you must first rest the nervous system if you're exhausted. Only then, after then, will your body be able to optimally restore the hormones, repair digestion if you have digestion issues, which is often the case, replete nutrients if you have nutrient deficiencies, which 9 times out of 10 you do, to rebuild mitochondria if you have low energy, which 9 times out of 10 I find that is the case with women who have fertility challenges, and to reboot the metabolism if you are having ovulation issues, which is often the case. So really take a picture of this or write this down if you haven't already, because this has really been a game changer for me. It has taken me years to figure this out, and I'm sharing it with you. So make sure you write this down. Do not miss this very, very important piece. So if you aren't getting thoroughly evaluated with advanced comprehensive testing to find the root causes, if you aren't making the foundational lifestyle changes that stack the cards in your favor, and if you don't have a strategic system to overcome reproductive aging and optimize your fertility system, if you are missing any of those critical pieces, then you are really creating a risk for yourself and your legacy. So you must have all of those pieces in your game plan. So this is the 5-part protocol. I am showing this so you can write it down or take a screenshot. Now, we're not done yet. We're going to go a little deeper, but I wanted to give you the foundation to make sure that we're on the same page. So the foundations are: find the root cause, let go of limiting lifestyle habits, overcome premature reproductive aging, welcome your super fertile body, and the 6-step fertility optimization system. And this is the 5-part protocol to help you accelerate your time to pregnancy, lower your costs on fertility treatment, and lower your risk of pregnancy complications. All right, you got it? All right, hopefully you're following. All right, let's go deeper. So this is where you're stuck. If you are fertility body type 1, 2, or 3, this is where you're stuck. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is this? This is a cycle chart. This is a cycle chart that tracks not just the period, but also tracks cervical fluid and also tracks basal body temperatures. So this is a standardized way that I teach the women that I work with to track their cycles so that we can see the full scope of what's happening cycle to cycle, so that we can identify any silent dysfunctions that blood tests just really don't catch. All right. So this is primarily why I have them do the cycle charting this way. So if you're fertility body type 1, 2, or 3, you likely have a short luteal phase. So if you look at the overall pattern of the temperatures, you'll notice that below the line, there is a pattern of lower temperatures. And then above the line, there's a pattern of higher temperatures. Now, what happens between the two is ovulation. Ovulation is what gives us the higher temperatures above the line. So we've identified that ovulation is in fact happening because the temps spike up and they stay up. You see that pattern, right? But although she's ovulating, what's happening is that phase is too short. So if you count the dots in the pattern above the line, you'll see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days. So 9 days in the cycle, she's in the luteal phase. But optimally, we want that phase to be at minimum 12 days. 10 days is like the absolute minimum, but that still is a little too borderline. So we really aim for minimum 12 up to 14 days. So clearly with 9 days, it's falling short. And the reason why this is significant is because this is where we begin to see things like miscarriage, like really, really early miscarriage. So I tell women sometimes that if you know that you're ovulating, you're not getting pregnant, it's possible that you're miscarrying so early that you're not catching it. And this is typically the chart that we see where that happens. So if you're fertility body type 1, 2, or 3, you want to focus on improving your egg quality so that you can naturally improve the luteal phase. This is another pattern that you may be stuck at. And this is also for fertility body type 1, 2, and 3. So this one is a little different than the previous one because if you notice the temps below the line, you notice how erratic it looks. So it looks like all over the place. It's not as stable as the last one. So whenever I see erratic temps like this, what I know for sure is that there is some sort of blood sugar dysregulation or insulin dysregulation happening that's interfering with egg quality. And so what you also see in the luteal phase and the temps above the line, you also see there's a short luteal phase. So whenever there's erratic temps in the first half of the cycle like that, I can almost bet that there is going to be a short luteal phase because what happens in the first phase will influence what happens in the second phase because they're connected. All right. So if you are fertility body type 1, 2, or 3, this is what could be happening underneath the surface, and this is where you could be stuck, and this is what you need to address. If you're fertility body type 2 or 5, this could be where you're stuck. So here we see there's a period, there is lower temps and then higher temps. So there is ovulation happening because you see that shift from lower temps to higher temps. But if you notice that there's a delay in ovulation, so typically ovulation happens within, I've seen ovulation happen as early 9-10 days. I'm an early ovulator, up to about day 14, day 15. Here you see ovulation has happened on like day 18 or 19. And when you see that, what you want to think about is the quality of the egg is being compromised. So if you are fertility body type 2 or 5, this also could be where you're stuck. If you are fertility body type 4 or 6, you're likely stuck here. So with those body types, what I've seen is typically the periods disappear, and when the periods disappear, there's obviously no ovulation. So if you notice in this pattern, you don't see a distinct lower temp phase and a higher temp phase. You just kind of see the temps are just all over the place, right? And you don't see any notations of bleeding. So there's no period and no ovulation. And if you are fertility body type 4 or 6, this is likely where you're stuck. Also, this pattern I've seen amongst fertility body type 2. This is you have a period, but there's no ovulation. So estrogen is just present, no ovulation happens, and so progesterone never comes on the scene. And you can tell that this is the case because there's no distinct lower temp and higher temps. They're just kind of like the same. So if you're fertility body type 2, you could also be stuck here. So you could be having a period, but no ovulation is probably happening. This is what you want. So what you notice here, you notice the distinct 2 phases in the temperature, lower and higher. So that means ovulation has happened. You notice a normal amount of bleeding. Typically, I tell women no more than 5 days of bleeding. And within the 5 days, you actually want to watch out for excess bleeding. So in this case, there really isn't any excess bleeding happening. There's a normal amount of bleeding, which is good. And then what you notice is before ovulation happens, there is presence of cervical fluid. I can't stress enough how cervical fluid is really, really important for pregnancy, especially natural pregnancy, because the cervical fluid is what activates the sperm. It keeps the sperm alive in the vaginal canal until ovulation happens. So it actually extends our fertile window within the cycle. So if you notice here, there's 5 days of cervical fluid, which is what's optimal is 5 days. Anything below that, if it's 4 days, it's okay. But when you start seeing like 1 day of cervical fluid, 2 days of cervical fluid, then it starts to be like, okay, something is going on and we need to intervene. And usually it has to do with estrogen imbalance. And then once ovulation occurs, you can see that the luteal phase is long enough. So if you count the dots above the line, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 days. That is a really, 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 really optimal luteal phase. That tells me that this is like premium quality egg because there is enough cervical fluid. So that means there's enough estrogen present and there's enough progesterone present to hold the pregnancy to term. So this is what you want to get pregnant. This is the pattern in your cycle charts that you want in order to get pregnant. If any of those are compromised, it's going to block pregnancy. So, I want to talk about how to truly maximize the time you have left in your reproductive years in order to optimize your fertility. Now, this is what I call the incomplete cycle chart. Now, I'm going to risk stepping on some toes right now, but I hope that we've built a bit of a rapport by now. So, let's get into it. Let's get into the reality of your I've done everything and I'm still not getting pregnant. Because I get this a lot. Dr. Duga, I've tried everything. I'm doing everything. I don't know what's going on. I'm still not getting pregnant. And then I audit their cycles, and this is what the cycle chart usually looks like. All they're tracking is their period, and then they're leaving it up to the app to tell them whether or not they've ovulated, which is really the surest way to fail at tracking ovulation, because the apps are not scientifically tested for efficacy. So then I'll ask, okay, well, how long is your cycle? And there's you like, oh yeah, my period is about 3 to 5 days long, and then they'll kind of go on and on about their periods. And then once they stop, I said, okay, I'm going to rephrase that question. I'm asking you how long your cycle is, not your period. So I notice a lot of us believe that our period is the cycle, but our period is one phase within an entire cycle. So a full cycle is the first day of the full bleed of the period to the day before the next period. That is a complete cycle. So there's a lot of blocks around understanding our own menstrual cycles. And so because of that, the tracking and the charting is falls short, which is why a lot of women can't figure out on their own why they're not getting pregnant. Then when I ask about cervical fluid and the luteal phase length, I definitely get a blank stare, because that really goes beyond the understanding of most women's um, reproductive knowledge. And to be honest, I had to learn this older as I got older. I didn't learn about all of the phases in my menstrual cycle until actually med school, because we don't get any training on this in med school. So I had to do the learning on my own. And so in this work with women, I noticed that I have to pass on the knowledge, because there's such a gap in understanding our own bodies. But what you need to know is all of the fertility biomarkers, meaning the period, the length of the period, the cycle length, the cervical fluid, ovulation, luteal phase length, and BBTs, must be within normal limits to achieve optimal fertility. I will say that again. All of these biomarkers must be within normal limits to achieve optimal fertility. So it's not just your period. You have to pay attention to the other markers. So when I do the cycle audit and the only biomarker that's being tracked is the period, I'm like, yeah, you're doing a lot, spending a lot of money on fertility treatments and supplements and teas, but I don't know that any of the efforts that you spent your money and time on are actually improving and optimizing all of your fertility biomarkers, because you're not even tracking them. Chart your full menstrual cycle for acceleration. Now, I hope you've been taking notes the whole time, but if you haven't, please pull out a pen and notepad and start taking notes, because what I'm about to go over is going to be highly actionable. So you're going to be able to take it and apply it right now where you're at to figure out what are the hidden menstrual cycle abnormalities that's blocking your pregnancy. So, one of the first things we have our clients do is chart their full menstrual cycle. Now, this is what an ideal cycle chart looks like. So, if you notice, there's the period, there's the cervical fluid, and there's basal body temperatures. So, let's start with your period and what the optimal ranges should look like. Your period should last about 3 to 6 days, and it should have a bleeding pattern that starts out moderate or heavy and then gradually tapers off. The amount of bleeding should be between about 25 to 80 mLs, and I'll really break down what that really looks like. And then lastly, your period should be painless to moderately painful. Your period should not be severely painful to the point of you having to call out of work or you not being able to go to class or what have you. It should be painless to moderately painful. Now, the upper limit of 80 milliliters is used to define what's normal because women who regularly lose more than 80 milliliters of blood during their periods tend to have an increased likelihood of developing an iron deficiency. Now, to put that into perspective, 25 milliliters is just under an ounce. And if you use a menstrual cycle, you would be able to fill your cup at least once with the total amount of bleeding you had on all days of your period combined. 80 milliliters means that you filled at least 3.5 to 4 menstrual cups over the course of your period. Now, if you use pads or tampons, you can do the math considering that depending on the level of absorbency of the pad or tampon, you can expect each pad or tampon to hold anywhere from 1 milliliters, that's the very light kind, to 10 milliliters, that's the super heavy kind. So if you're using a tampon or a pad, it can range from 1 ml to 10 ml depending on whether you're using a light pad or tampon or a super heavy pad or tampon. Now, if you find that your period is more like a flood to the point where you need to change your pad or tampon every hour on the first 2 days of your period, or you have to change your menstrual cup every 2 hours, then consider asking your doctor to do an ultrasound of the abdomen and to really view your reproductive organs to see if there is any fibroids or polyps that may be contributing to the heavy periods. And you also want to have your iron levels checked. Iron is one of those interesting chicken or the egg situation when it comes to heavy bleeding, because on one end, if your period is extremely heavy, you could go on to develop an iron deficiency because you're losing so much blood every month. But on the flip side, an iron deficiency can actually cause you to bleed more heavily in the first place. Now, if your period is consistently less than 25 mLs, meaning you're a light bleeder, you'll want to take a closer look at the other menstrual cycle parameters to get an overall picture of whether or not your cycle is healthy. One of the parameters that you want to look at is ovulation. You want to see if you're ovulating, because if you don't ovulate and you bleed, it means that you're not having a true menstrual bleed. So one of the first parameters you want to look at is, are you ovulating? Your period is a reflection of how effectively your uterine lining has developed over the course of your menstrual cycle in response to your estrogen and progesterone levels. Now, there are 2 important stages in the development of the uterine lining. The first stage is the proliferation of your uterine lining as you approach ovulation. That is the building of your uterine lining as you approach ovulation. The second phase is the maturation of your uterine lining in your post-ovulatory phase. Now, in order for your uterine lining to develop, grow, and completely mature, you need to be pumping out healthy amounts of estrogen and progesterone over the course of your cycle. If you're not making enough hormones, for instance, if your progesterone levels are too low, then your lining won't fully develop and mature to the point that it can support the life of a fertilized egg. And if your lining is too thin, you won't be able to get pregnant because the fertilized egg won't have anywhere to implant. So if the total amount of bleeding you have during your period is extremely light, it is a reflection of your hormone levels and to what extent your endometrial lining or your uterine lining has or hasn't fully matured. Now, there was a study that examined the relationship between pregnancy and endometrial thickness, also known as uterine lining thickness. And what they found was that there was a minimum endometrial thickness that was required to get pregnant. The study showed that participants whose endometrial lining was thinner than 7 millimeters did not conceive. So too little bleeding can be as problematic of an issue as too much bleeding. The other fluid you want to track is cervical fluid. This fluid gets secreted by your cervix as estrogen levels rise, and as you approach ovulation. Now, you want 2 to 7 days of cervical fluid, and you want 1 day out of those days to be peak cervical fluid. And what that looks like, it looks like where either the cervical fluid is really lubricative when you wipe, it's clear when you look at it, or it's extremely stretchy where it's able to stretch beyond 1 inch. If you know anything about cervical fluid or have read about it, you hear people talk about that egg white cervical fluid. So egg white is one of the ways that we identify peak cervical fluid, but it doesn't have to be egg white. It could be like a cloudy white and still be peak cervical fluid. So what you want to notice is whether it's lubricative when you wipe, if it's clear, or if it's stretchy. Either of those characteristics denote peak cervical fluid. And also, the cervical fluid should dry up, meaning you shouldn't be noticing fluid throughout your entire cycle. So you should notice some dry days, and then you notice cervical fluid, and then it goes dry again. That's what you should notice in terms of your cervical fluid pattern throughout your menstrual cycle. Now, in a normal cycle, ovulation can happen as early as day 10 to as late as day 22 and day 23. So the teaching that ovulation happens on day 14 is not necessarily true, because some women ovulate earlier, some ovulate later, and then you have some who ovulate around that day 14. But more often than not, you'll find women who fall outside of that day 14 range. Now, you want to confirm ovulation by tracking BBT, and you want to see a shift in temperatures by at least a half of a degree. And you want the temperature rise to maintain until you start a new cycle. Now, the period of time between ovulation to your next period, if you're not pregnant, should be between 12 to 14 days. All right. I hope that you got all of that, because those are parameters that you want to check your period against, that you want to check your cervical fluid against, that you want to check your BBT against, to see whether or not you are falling within that optimal range. Now, the other critical part to this, charting your full menstrual cycle, is what are the things that actually optimize each phase of the cycle, and have you carved out non-negotiable time to work on the actual activities and efforts that get you closer to pregnancy? I call those efforts CEO activities, which stands for cycle and egg optimizing activities. Now, when I start working with a client, I say that you need to begin syncing your diet, exercise, and lifestyle to the different phases of your cycle. And the phase that we typically start with is the luteal phase, because it's one of the phases that is most sensitive to stressors like overwork, undereating, overexercise or underexercising, or just being too sedentary, sleep deprivation. And interestingly enough, it's the phase most women have issues in. And so the CEO activities we start with focusing on reducing stress exposure, combating stress excess, and not overdoing or underdoing exercise, and not overdoing or undereating, which you may be prone to. Now, here's a pro tip if you're not sure if chronic stress or high stress levels is blocking your pregnancy. A sure sign that you have high stress levels is a lack of appetite in the morning. So if you notice this sign, high stress is likely playing into your fertility challenges. Now, I'm about to share some suggestions for CEO activities that you can start right away. But the caveat to this is that this is for the preconception phase, meaning you're not actively trying to conceive, but you're preparing for the trying to conceive phase. So let's get into it. If you are fertility body type 1, stress is not much of an issue in the first half of your cycle, but begins to really make an impact in the weeks leading up to the menses, so the week before the period. And to help balance that, we want to do things to decrease stress, especially in the premenstrual period. Minimally, you should dedicate time to walk in nature and do some warm Epsom salt baths. Now, research has shown that relaxed, slow paced walking is able to lower stress, and that doing this in green areas is even better. Now, this technique, it has been so researched and is so effective that the Japanese even have a name for this. They call it shirin-yoku, which we know as forest bathing. The second thing is when you add Epsom salt to your bath, it takes an already relaxing activity and puts its stress reducing effects in overdrive. So, Epsom salt has magnesium sulfate in it, which is very relaxing to the nervous system. So, both of these things dramatically counter stress and keep the fertility system balanced. So, here is the CEO activity I suggest. In the 2 weeks leading up to your period, I want you to take either a 30 to 90-minute walk, preferably in a green setting, or a bath. Do this every day, and you will be priming your fertility system to function at its optimal level. If you are fertility body type 2, you are likely estrogen dominant. Now, being estrogen dominant sometimes means that your own body is making too much estrogen, but a lot of the times I find that it means that you are being exposed to chemicals and toxins in the environment that look like estrogen, and so it's making you appear to be estrogen dominant and throwing off your fertility system. So minimally, you should dedicate time for hot baths and or sauna therapy. The reason why these two therapies is because you want to sweat. You want to sweat the excess estrogen to bring back balance to estrogen and progesterone so that you can optimize your fertility system. So here is the CEO activity I want you to do. Begin taking a hot bath or sauna, and you want it hot enough to get you sweating, but cool enough for it to remain relaxing. And you want to sweat for about 20 to 60 minutes. And you want to do this at least 3 times per week. If you can do it more days than that, even better. But minimally, I want you to do this 3 times per week. For my type 3 girlies, you are likely progesterone deficient. In your case, your stress system may be a little jumbled a bit because progesterone is required to keep this entire system primed and sensitized. And if your progesterone levels fall short, your fertility system can become less dependable and more prone to issues. So here is the CEO activity I want you to do. I want you to learn to use your breath to adjust your physiology as needed. Learning to use your breath can produce a relaxation response in your brain and body that will wipe the stress away and rebalance progesterone. So the technique I want you to do involves taking 10 deep breaths. So I want you to count 8 seconds on the inhale, hold your breath for 2 seconds, then exhale for 4 seconds. After completing these 10 deep breaths, close your eyes, take a deep breath in and hold it for as long as you can, and then slowly release. So that's a technique I want you to do in order to begin to rebalance your progesterone levels. For my type 4 girlies, in your case, the brain signal has either lost its ability to communicate to the ovaries, or the ovaries have lost their ability to respond. But in most cases, I find that it's usually a combination of both of these. But most issues really start in the brain and in the ovaries. Now, that is why you want to do things to decrease stress and reduce its effect on the brain first. This is the best way to reboot the ovarian system and get estrogen and progesterone back online. Now, in your case, getting your body in restorative relaxation mode is going to be the key. The best way to do that is to sleep. However, there is only one problem. Of all the fertility body types, you may have the most difficult time getting to sleep at night. So to combat this, you can use 2 other techniques alongside sleep: naps and meditation. Research shows that even a 10 to 30-minute nap can undo many of the hormonal problems caused by sleep loss. And meditation also has been shown to restore function in the body and brain, similar to how a nap does. So that's the CEO activity I want you to follow is I want you to prioritize sleep by taking 3 steps. First, I want you to go to bed 1 hour earlier and rise 1 hour later if you can. Then I want you to shoot for 9 hours of sleep every night. Second, I want you to take a brief 10 to 20-minute nap between the hours of noon and 4 p.m. 5 days a week. And then finally, I want you to meditate for 5 minutes by focusing on your breath at least 3 times per week. For my type 5 girlies, due to fluctuating estrogen and falling progesterone during this time of your life, this is the perimenopause phase, your entire system is slowly losing its cyclical rhythm. So this means that you are now becoming more sensitive to stress. Why? Because having balanced estrogen and progesterone actually protects you from stress. But as a type 5, you're slowly losing those two hormones. So it makes you even more sensitive to the stresses around you. It makes you more reactive to stresses around you. It makes your system more reactive to stress. Okay. So it's essential that you learn how to cope with stress more effectively. It is essential. I can't stress this enough. But the issue you're going to run into is that, our modern lifestyle has a completely dysfunctional attitude towards stress. But you have to be the one to make a mindset shift around stress management because it's crucial that you do things to reduce your stress load. So here is the CEO activity that I want you to engage in. I want you to engage in as much spa treatments as possible. Spa, facials, pedicures, massages, all of those things are going to help relax the nervous system and is going to create a buffer between you and the stressors around you to help balance estrogen and progesterone. I can't stress this enough. As simple as it seems, this is what a lot of women have difficulty doing in the perimenopause phase, but it's crucial that you begin to reduce your stress load and you also actively engage in lifestyle habits that protect you from stress, that bring your stress load down. For my type 6 girlies, get enough sleep. that's really the only suggestion I have because it's the essential one. Get enough sleep. If you're not getting sleep in the evenings, I suggest that you take 10 to 30-minute naps during the day between the hours of noon and 4 p.m. if your sleep is disrupted at night. And you want to make sure those CEO efforts happen every single week. And this is really a small, minor habit that is really going to distinguish your outcomes from what's typical and accelerate your time to pregnancy. Okay? Those activities are how you can begin to take control and step into the CEO role on your fertility journey. So, let's break this down. We're almost done. I promise. We're almost done. We're at the end. And I hope you're still with me. If you need to, go ahead and pause this training, refill your drink, go get some water, go use the restroom, and then come back and have your notepad out. So set a big goal right now. Now, in the beginning of this training, I asked you to set a goal. So hopefully you still have that. If you did not set a goal, then set it right now because we're gonna do this together. So figure out by what month of the year you want to be pregnant. What's your big goal? So let's take, for example, that you've decided that you want to be pregnant by the holidays. So let's choose November as the goal. Now let's reverse engineer it. Let's work backwards. Now I want you to figure out how many cycles you have to work on. So rule of thumb is if you have short cycles, you more than likely will end up with more cycles to work on. If you have long cycles, you likely have fewer cycles to work on. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, let's use as an example that you have 6 cycles to work on between now and your target month that you want to be pregnant for. I want you to take those 6 cycles and I want you to -2. The reason is because I like to say that give yourself 2 cycles to actively try to conceive. So that means you actually have 4 cycles to really focus on optimizing your fertility. And then once we are complete with those 4 cycles, we move into the active phase of trying to conceive for 2 cycles. All right. I hope you're following me so far. And we're going to continue to work backwards from the goal. Now I want you to figure out what you need to be working on every cycle to hit that goal. And remember to leverage our system that I just taught you. I taught you the flow method accompanied with the 6-step fertility optimization system. And in that flow method, I talked about the most common root causes. So let's take, for example, that you decide that you are going to focus on each of those root causes, because honestly, I find that most women have more than one root cause. So let's take, for example, that we're going to address all of the major ones. So here are the root causes again. So cycle 1, you can decide to work on the toxic overload and the chronic stress together because they really go hand in hand. So those two are really good to work on together within one cycle. Then cycle 2, you can move forward with focusing on gut dysfunction and hormonal imbalance because those two also go together very well. And then cycle 3, you really might want to hone in on the nutrient deficiencies. It's not to say that you're not working on nutrient deficiencies from jump, but cycle 3 is when you really, really, really hone in on repleting your nutrients. And then cycle 4, if there is some type of trauma, then you want to focus on resolving that trauma, whether that's mental or emotional trauma you want to work on. And then cycle 5 and 6 is when you move into the W of the flow formula, which is welcome your super fertile body, which is when you move into trying to conceive. So here's a real life example of what fertility optimization looks like and what it looks like to execute on optimizing fertility cycle after cycle until we actually reach optimal levels in our menstrual cycle and our hormonal parameters. So let's begin with cycle 1, which is in the top row to the far left. So in cycle 1, this is sort of in the beginning stages of when we started working together, where we trained her on how to properly track and chart her cycle. And this is the first cycle that we got where we were able to see what was really going on. Immediately, what I know with fertility body type 1 is it's not the first half of the cycle that they usually have issues in per se. It's usually the second half of the cycle where we start to see issues arise. So immediately what I was able to see in that luteal phase, which is the phase of temps that's above the line. So if you look at the graph, you see a line that goes across, you see a set of temps below the line, and then you see a set of temps above the line. What I'm referring to is a set of temps that's above the line. That is the luteal phase, also known as the post-ovulation phase. The reason why this phase is really important is because this is usually the phase where women tend to overwork. And that is a huge mistake because that is the phase that is really sensitive to stress. So immediately what I see is her, even though she ovulates, her temps drop down. They drop down way too low. They don't sustain themselves, and so it has this pattern of rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling. So what we did is immediately began to really work on reducing toxic overload while also while also getting the body out of chronic stress, because what we know for sure is when the body is in chronic stress, it doesn't function as optimally, and we always see a an issue in that luteal phase. And so once we worked on that for like a full cycle, what we saw in cycle 2 was the improvement of follicle development. And the way that I knew there was an improvement in her follicle development or her egg development was if you look below the temps, you see a row of vertical bars. So we saw an increase in the amount of cervical fluid days that she had. So she went from 5 days to 6 days. And we saw improvement in the quality of her cervical fluid. So she went from having 3 days of peak fluid to having 6 days of peak fluid. So I knew immediately we were improving her estrogen levels, and we were also improving the development of the follicle, which becomes the egg. So then the next thing that we went on to work on was gut dysfunction and hormonal imbalance. And what we saw in cycle 3 was that her luteal phase temps began to improve. If you pay attention to the luteal phase in that third cycle, from left to right, the third one at the top, we see that the temps go up and they stay up longer before they actually drop. Whereas if you compare it to the first cycle, her temps would spike up and then they would come back down really, really low. But in the third cycle, what you see is it's beginning to sustain. So what that means is she's improving her progesterone production, which means that she's more able to sustain a pregnancy if she were to get pregnant. Before we moved into cycle 4, what we did is we started working on nutrient deficiencies. Not that we didn't start working on it from jump, but we really started to focus in on repleting the nutrients that she was deficient in. And so what we see in cycle 4 is we see even more of an improvement in that luteal phase. So if you look at the temps above the line, you see temps go up, and they pretty much stay up. Yes, they come down, but they don't come down too far, right? They kind of sustain themselves well above that line and not tinkering near the line. The other thing too is the luteal phase length is between the 12 to 14 days that we like to see it at. So once I saw this pattern in that fourth cycle, I gave her the go ahead and try to get pregnant, and she got pregnant on the first try. And that's the chart at the very bottom that has the label pregnant on it. Now, do you see how manageable that is? The reason I showed that real life example is because I wanted you to see what is actually happening and how quickly we can begin to see improvements. Okay, so when you focus your efforts using the right strategies, using an effective system, that's how quickly you can begin to see results. And so with our help, you can find the right protocol that works best for your unique situation and your unique fertility. So that's what we help our clients to do, is figure out how do we personalize this system to your unique situation, your unique fertility, and your unique goals. I want to show you a visual of what it can look like when you're doing all of the things without focusing on optimizing your unique fertility system. So when we look at studies, we see that the average time to pregnancy for women 35 and younger is 7 months, and over 12 months for women over 35 years of age. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because Black and Latino women are likely to have an older biological age than their chronological age, time to pregnancy is much longer than what's reported in the studies. Now, I've seen a time to pregnancy as long as 10 years, but more commonly, I see a time to pregnancy that's between about 3 to 5 years. You may be doing the Clomid. You may be doing the metformin. You may be doing the IUI. You may be doing the recommended procedures and surgeries. And maybe you've even made the big move to do IVF. But the problem is, not only are you not getting pregnant, but you feel exhausted. You feel irritable. You feel wired and anxious at night with your mind racing. And you probably also have performance problems like feeling exhausted in the morning, having midday energy slumps, and brain fog, making it difficult to concentrate and perform tasks at work. You may also be experiencing difficulty losing weight and burning fat, and as a result, you're gaining unwanted belly fat. And if this has been a very long journey for you, you may also be losing your libido and you're noticing changes in your menstrual cycle that has become irregular or disappeared completely. And as if that's not enough, you may have even started to develop digestive problems, which can cause gas, bloating, constipation, food sensitivities, skin issues like eczema and boils underneath the skin, and can also cause chronic joint pain. So, if we're being completely honest, you're not just concerned about getting pregnant, you are legit concerned about your health and your well being. So, you may be doing all the things, but your journey feels never ending and feels very heavy. This is what subfertility looks like. This is where you're likely stuck month after month and year after year because you've not stepped into being the CEO of your fertility journey where you're actively optimizing your fertility system. Subfertility happens because of subpar effort towards optimizing your fertility. This is what I want for you: acceleration. I want you to conceive within 6 months. But not only do I want you on the fast track, but I want you to first and foremost feel good again. I want you to go from feeling exhausted to feeling energized. I want you to go from feeling stuck and like you're at a standstill to having an effective, clear game plan to improve your health and well being. I want you to be able to look into the mirror and love the body that you see. I want you to have an effective system that tracks your progress. And most importantly, I want you to be confident that the efforts you're putting in is getting you closer and closer to your baby and the family of your dreams. How does this feel? Does this feel better? Does this match what you want to experience on your fertility journey? I hope that this is feeling light. I hope this is feeling hopeful for you. I hope this is really opening your eyes to a new option that you've not considered before and that you feel really resonates with where you want to be. So let's recap. First, you learned what the 5 key components to fertility optimization are. And these are the 5 key components: find the root cause, let go of limiting lifestyle habits, overcome by reversing reproductive aging, welcome your super fertile body, and the 6-step fertility optimization system. Then we focused on what does optimized fertility actually look like, because I don't think enough of us are having real conversations of what it visually looks like to have optimal fertility and how to actually achieve that. Then you learned how to accelerate your time to pregnancy and how the fertility optimization process breaks down into super doable monthly goals. And lastly, you saw how you can personalize your goals to fit your unique fertility body type and your unique goals. This is Dr. Duga. I hope that this was incredibly powerful for you. I hope this is a pivotal moment in your fertility journey where you are rethinking how you're approaching your fertility journey.